I'm Cheryl Johnson, and this is Basic Baking 101. Today, I'm going to instruct you on how to make a sweet saffron loaf. You can pause your video here to get the list of ingredients. So get out your mixing bowls, and we begin with 1 tablespoon of active dry yeast mixed with 1 1/4 cups of warm water to dissolve it. Then, because it's a live and active organism, it needs food. So we're going to give it 2 tablespoons of sugar so that it can eat and live and grow. And that's going to make our bread rise. Then we're going to have 1/4 cup of melted butter to add buttery goodness and moisture, along with 1/2 teaspoon of Spanish saffron. That's going to give it a lovely flavor and an all-natural color to the bread. So after about 15 minutes, the mixture starts to look a little bit bubbly, and that means the yeast is alive and your bread's going to be successful. So at this point we want to add our salt because salt retards yeast activation, and we don't want to put it in until after we're sure the yeast is alive and thriving. We're going to crack 2 eggs and lightly beat them with 1 12-ounce can of sweetened condensed milk. That will add creaminess and a little more sweetness to the bread. Add half of your total 5 cups of flour plus 1 tablespoon of real vanilla. And also, we're going to put potato flakes in there because that's going to give it moisture and let it last longer for many, many days. So add the rest of your unbleached bread flour. That's going to be 5 cups total. Then it's going to eventually mix together and clump into a ball. You want it to stick together and not to the side of the bowl. So we're going to try to scrape the bowl a little bit and then add flour to keep the bread from sticking against the side of the bowl again. And as it develops gluten and stretches the flour, the gluten will structuralize the dough and allow it to hold up when it rises instead of collapsing in on itself. So that's why we have to knead it. You want to knead this for about 10 minutes at this point to really get that gluten elasticized. And that's what causes the dough to stick together. Eventually it cleans the side of the bowl all by itself, and you don't have to add much flour or any flour at all. So we take it out of the bowl after that, and we're going to have to knead it by hand. So this is the part that's fun. I like to knead it another 5 to 7 minutes and develop the glutens a little bit more, give it more structure. That'll cause the bread to bake higher and fluffier. This is a recipe I developed by crossing a Jewish challah with a Hawaiian bread. It's really wonderful. I love it. It's one of my favorites. So once we knead it for another 5 to 7 minutes, you want it to look kind of blistered yet smooth on the surface, smooth to the touch. Place it in a greased and covered bowl for about an hour and let it double in bulk. Then I'm going to punch all the air out of it, squeeze it, and pop all those bubbles. This is a fun part. And that's going to redistribute the yeast bubbles and make them not so large, make your bread more finer of a grain. Instead of flour on the table, you can use a little bit of oil. This is a recipe that I developed by combining a Jewish challah with a Hawaiian bread. It's one of my favorite recipes. Look at the saffron. It's just beautiful. It's going to taste really good. So after we've kneaded it for another 5 minutes or so to really incorporate all the bubbles and to make a finer grain of bread, I'm going to cut it into 8 individual portions, saving the ends as scraps, and I'm going to use them for a garnish. Once we have our 8 individual portions, we're going to roll them into the braids, kind of like when you were a kid playing with Play-Doh. You take the bread and you want a smooth exterior, so you tuck and roll it. Tuck it underneath and then put some pressure on it so you hide the seam a little bit, and that way your braids are going to be nice and smooth without a lot of lumps or bumps. Once we have all of our braids rolled, we're going to line them up and moisten the ends slightly with a little bit of egg yolk mixed with water. That'll help stick the ends together and not come apart in the baking. Then we're going to make a 4 braid, and if you don't want to make a 4-braid, you can do it with a 3-braid, or you can just make a loaf of bread, a French loaf, or rolls. It doesn't matter, it's still delicious bread, but I like the presentation of the braid because it looks more traditional, more rustic. We're going to stick the ends together with a little bit more egg yolk and water. That'll keep it nice and smooth in the baking and not come apart. And then we refine the other end, because while you're working with it, it always comes apart a little bit. So we want to stick that really well. And then we're going to make our garnish out of the scraps. This will be a 3-braid, and that's going to be braided and then put on the top after we've brushed it with a little bit of egg yolk and water to make it stick so it doesn't fall off. So the same process applies for the two. Put the bread on a greased pan and then brush it with a little egg yolk mixed with 2 teaspoons of water, the same egg yolk that we used to stick the ends together. And then we're going to put our little garnish braid on top just to give it a little more character and visual appeal. Then you want to cover it with some greased cellophane and let it rise for about another hour until it's close to double in bulk. And then we're going to put it in the oven and bake it for about an hour at 350 degrees. You want to check it after about 45 minutes and make sure that it isn't getting too done. The egg wash on the top tends to brown easily, so you don't want a really high temperature. That's why we bake it at 350. The bread is done when you tap on it and it sounds hollow. This bread is fragrant and delicious. Thanks for joining me on Basic Baking 101. I'm Cheryl Johnson. Happy baking! Basic Baking is sponsored by giftformylady.com, the website with gifts all women love. No sizes to pick and free shipping. That's giftformylady.com.